After the period of forced preparation and consolidation of the political systems in both regions, the situation in South Vietnam toward the late 1950s began to shift into an increasingly intense state of confrontation. The conflict did not occur solely on the military front, but was also clearly manifested through political struggle combined with violence. Communist forces in the South continuously carried out propaganda activities, organized demonstrations against the government, incited peasants to oppose landlords, conducted assassinations of individuals regarded as informants, besieged outposts, and sabotaged strategic hamlets and plantation zones. These activities rendered the security situation, particularly in rural areas, progressively unstable and difficult to control. In response, the government of the Republic of Vietnam intensified search and destroy operations and repression campaigns aimed at eliminating opposing forces. These harsh measures initially inflicted significant losses on communist forces, while simultaneously deepening and widening the escalation of the conflict. Under growing pressure from large-scale suppression campaigns conducted by the Republic of Vietnam, by the end of 1958, communist forces in the South had fallen into a state of severe weakness. Numerous bases were exposed and dismantled, organizational networks were disrupted, and armed units suffered heavy losses. In this context, the Central Committee directed Southern organizations to temporarily restrict public activities in order to preserve their forces. Some elements shifted to legal or semi-legal activities, while the majority withdrew deep into base areas such as the Plain of Reeds or border regions adjacent to Cambodia to await favorable conditions. During this period, political and armed struggle movements in the South declined markedly. Many cadres lost contact with the masses, morale deteriorated, and some were even compelled to abandon revolutionary activities in order to earn a livelihood. Facing the risk of organizational disintegration, in January 1959, the Central Committee of the Vietnam Workers' Party issued Resolution No. 15, affirming armed struggle as an inevitable path. This resolution marked a crucial turning point in revolutionary strategy, laying the foundation for the reorganization and recovery of communist forces in South Vietnam in the following years. Following the issuance of Resolution No. 15, during the 1959 to 1960 period, revolutionary armed forces in the South gradually resumed operations under conditions marked by persistent difficulties and limitations. Small-scale armed units were re-established, combining military action with the reconstruction of local political infrastructure. Armed activities were largely dispersed in nature, serving both to test combat methods and to protect the mass movement as it slowly recovered. At the same time, North Vietnam began to openly increase its support for the southern battlefield in both manpower and material resources. Many cadres and soldiers who had regrouped to the north after 1954 were sent back to the south, contributing to the strengthening of command structures and organizational capacity. This support played a significant role in enhancing the combat effectiveness of revolutionary armed forces. Thanks to the combination of assistance from the North and local self-consolidation, the political military struggle movement in the South gradually recovered, particularly in rural areas, creating favorable conditions for more robust developments in the years that followed. Entering the 1960s, the international landscape was profoundly shaped by the Cold War between the capitalist bloc led by the United States and the socialist bloc headed by the Soviet Union. During this period, the Soviet Union rose strongly with a series of symbolic scientific and technological achievements, especially in the field of space exploration, generating significant strategic pressure on the United States and altering the balance of power between the two superpowers. This comprehensive competition transformed many regions of the world into arenas of indirect confrontation, among which Vietnam emerged as a particularly important geopolitical hotspot. Although serving as a central pillar of the socialist camp, the Soviet Union in the early 1960s continued to pursue a policy of peaceful coexistence. Consequently, the level of military assistance to Vietnam remained relatively cautious. Concurrently, China, amid competition for influence with the Soviet Union, actively intervened in Vietnamese affairs in order to assert its role and position within the global revolutionary movement. The intersection of interests and strategies among major powers increasingly internationalized the conflict in Vietnam. Against the backdrop of the gradual recovery of revolutionary forces in the South, and under the influence of the Cold War environment, from 1960 onward, the Đông Khơi general uprising movement erupted and rapidly spread across numerous localities, particularly in rural areas. This movement closely combined mass political struggle with localized armed actions aimed at dismantling the Republic of Vietnam's system of grassroots control. The uprisings led to the collapse of many commune and hamlet-level administrative structures, placing President Ngo Dinh Diem's government in a passive position and severely weakening its ability to maintain order in rural regions. By the end of 1960, a substantial portion of South Vietnam's rural areas had come under the control or influence of revolutionary forces. On the basis of these initial successes, on December 20th, 1960, the National Liberation Front of South Vietnam was officially established. The front brought together various political forces, religious groups, and social strata under the leadership of communist forces, with the aim of unifying struggle movements and creating a political military organization representing the resistance in the South. Its establishment marked a significant development, ushering the conflict in South Vietnam into a new phase of increasing scale and intensity. In response to the strong growth of the Đông Khơi movement and the establishment of the National Liberation Front of South Vietnam, the United States adjusted its intervention strategy by implementing the model known as special war. Under this strategy, the United States refrained from deploying large-scale combat troops directly, instead focusing on providing modern weaponry, training, and military advisors to support the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, while designing operational plans to destroy revolutionary forces. A key pillar of this strategy was the Strategic Hamlet Program, aimed at isolating revolutionary forces from the rural population, their principal source of support. However, during implementation, the special war strategy revealed numerous limitations. The Battle of Up Buck in January 1963 became a representative example. In this engagement, the Liberation Army of South Vietnam defeated a large force of the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, equipped and commanded with the assistance of U.S. advisors. This victory carried not only direct military significance, but also profound psychological impact, undermining confidence in the tactical and technological superiority of the Republic of Vietnam and the United States, while strongly encouraging the armed struggle movement throughout the South. Following military setbacks and mounting pressure from the revolutionary movement, the Republic of Vietnam entered a severe political crisis in 1963. The climax of this crisis was the Buddhist movement, which erupted following the Vesak celebrations in Hue in protest against policies perceived as religious discrimination under President Ngo Dinh Diem's administration. The movement rapidly spread across South Vietnam, drawing participation from multiple social groups and sharply eroding the government's legitimacy and credibility. In this context, on November 1, 1963, a military coup took place, overthrowing and assassinating Ngo Dinh Diem and Ngo Dinh Nhu. Numerous sources indicate that the United States was indirectly involved and did not prevent the coup. After this event, the Republic of Vietnam entered a prolonged period of instability, marked by successive coups and frequent changes of government, which severely weakened leadership structures and the capacity to conduct the war. After the 1963 coup, and particularly following the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in November of the same year, U.S. policy toward Vietnam underwent a clear shift. The new administration under President Lyndon B. Johnson concluded that maintaining indirect intervention was no longer sufficient to halt the growth of the revolutionary movement in the South. Amid continued political instability in the Republic of Vietnam and an increasingly unfavorable battlefield situation, the United States decided to escalate the war significantly. From 1965 onward, the United States officially shifted from the special war strategy to local war, deploying expeditionary combat forces directly into South Vietnam. Simultaneously, the U.S. Air Force expanded military operations into North Vietnam, conducting large-scale bombing campaigns aimed at destroying infrastructure, disrupting supply routes, and exerting strategic pressure on the government of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam. Direct U.S. military involvement fundamentally altered the nature and scale of the conflict, ushering the Vietnam War into a new phase marked by heightened intensity and deep internationalization. As the United States expanded the war and intervened directly in Vietnam, the international environment surrounding the conflict also underwent significant changes. The Soviet Union and China, despite profound ideological disagreements and rivalry for leadership within the socialist camp, both increased their assistance to North Vietnam. This aid included not only weapons and military equipment, but also technical specialists, advisors, and training support, contributing to the enhancement of North Vietnam's air defense and combat capabilities. Such support enabled the North to gradually counter increasingly intense U.S. air campaigns. Alongside the overt war, the United States and the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, conducted what was termed a secret war, aimed at internal sabotage. Paratrooper commando teams were organized, trained, and deployed into North Vietnam with missions to gather intelligence, sabotage infrastructure, and disrupt the rear. However, most of these operations failed disastrously. Many teams were detected, captured, or eliminated shortly after infiltration, failing to achieve their intended strategic objectives. These failures highlighted the limitations of covert warfare measures against an increasingly fortified security and defense system. By mid-1965, following a series of failures in indirect intervention and covert warfare, the United States reached a decisive turning point in its Vietnam policy. In June 1965, the U.S. officially committed large-scale expeditionary forces to direct combat, marking a fundamental shift in the course of the war. From that point onward, the Vietnam battlefield was no longer primarily a domestic conflict supported from outside, but rather a direct military confrontation between the United States and Vietnamese revolutionary forces. The massive deployment of U.S. troops into South Vietnam, coupled with intensified bombing of the North, pushed the Vietnam War into its most brutal phase. Large-scale military campaigns were conducted continuously across all three regions, employing unprecedented levels of firepower and modern warfare technology. The result was severe destruction of human life, infrastructure, and the environment, accompanied by profound political, military, and social transformations. This turning point not only determined the trajectory of the war in the years that followed, but also made the Vietnam War one of the most emblematic and costly conflicts of the Cold War era.